Volkswagen to use a little mirth and goodwill. Obviously the company's been in kind of dire straits lately with Dieselgate. And a vehicle like this is something that stirs, it tugs at the heartstrings and stirs up emotions. And it's also a viable solution in terms of future powertrain technology. And there's a lot of clever interior tech as well.
Right, this is an autonomous concept. You hit the center of the steering wheel, the whole thing folds down into the dashboard, and then you can kind of chill out inside and have this big living room on wheels experience we've seen from so many other concept cars. And of course, the van is really a natural application of that kind of skateboard battery pack design of having a nice flat platform that you can build on, and ultimately, a big old box gives you the maximum interior space. Absolutely,
and with previous concepts, trying to stick a motor in the front of a vehicle, a gas motor, and then have it crash safely is almost impossible. So an electric skateboard sort of configuration really allows for that flat front, which is critical to getting the the visuals that you need for a Neo bus.
Drew, do you think Volkswagen can build any more concepts of a microbus, or is it time to actually make one of the damn things?
No, I think by now there might be tapped out on that front. The bus itself was aesthetically at least a challenging enough presentation here to entertain enough. I think they've ticked enough boxes on that front for now.
What's the reaction to Dieselgate been like in the UK? I mean, here in the US, there's a lot of angst against VW. Has it been that strong in the UK as well?
I think the uproar in terms of consumers has been on an equal par. There's a slightly more sour taste in the mouth because consumers are not being offered the same amount of compensation, or really any. They're still retrofitting the cars and fixing the mistakes that have been made. But because they maintain that there is less loss in value for reselling the cars, people like my dad, whose car was affected by it as well, hasn't been offered any compensation in any shape or form. Plus, on a legal front, because the infringements aren't as legally impacting on the company as they are perhaps in the US, where criminal convictions can actually be brought for these things, it's we're more interested in how it unfolds over here. It has impacted their reputation massively because it's not only the VW brand and Audi, but it's also Seat and it's Skoda, and it's a far wider raft. Take a significant chunk of the British car industry, part of it, yet somehow, because the impact is greater legally over here in the US, that's the angle that we've been following. It possibly will allow them to fly more under the radar and significantly now maybe put more of it behind them than it is over here. But it is something that we keep an eye on, and it probably will echo for a good couple of years to come before they're fully over it in the UK as well.
And Chris, it seems like the Audi Buzz is designed to help us forget about that. One, by going back to a retro time before Dieselgate, when everything was happy with Volkswagen, and also by providing an electric powertrain and ultimately a new clean way forward. Is that about right, you think?
I think it's all of those things and more. As we've talked about, Volkswagen's been flirting with the idea of a retro bus since the early 2000s. Yeah. The Volkswagen Beetle has been a success, but it's really long in the tooth. They've done a couple of generations of it now. It doesn't really work anymore, so that's going to be going away.
Yeah, it's interesting that we're here celebrating this retro bus while they're in the process basically of killing the retro Beetle that's been around for so long.
And frankly, they've needed people movers of all sizes, and Volkswagen is finally starting to do that. It actually had a really good show in terms of product. It also brought out the Tiguan SUV, which it desperately needs. That's the hottest segment in the market, the compact SUVs.
For this new generation.
So they finally have addressed that concern. They just addressed the full-size 3-row SUV with the Atlas. They showed a slightly visually sportier version of that here. And now they could have the product. The question is, do they have the market strength, the goodwill, and are they going to get their pricing in order?
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, there's a lot of crazy technology in a van like that, and that would be a very expensive thing to bring to market. But with the Tiguan, we've seen them being very aggressive with pricing right now, starting at, I think, 30 grand for that, built here in the US, which is great. And they're really making a strong push to move that down market, much like they did with the Jetta. And there was great success with the Jetta before everything kind of blew up there, as I recall.
I think the concerning issue is that anything based on this sort of concept probably won't come to market for some time now.
Yeah.
It could be 2022, 2023. That's a really, really long time from now. But at least Volkswagen, we know, is developing the modular electric architecture underneath it, and they're going to be rolling out other types of vehicles on that platform. They're looking at putting out a compact first, which they showed in Paris, a version of that, the ID concept. And then they'll probably something like an SUV, and then they could look at this. I actually would like to see them flip-flop that and put the van first, because I think it'll be more interesting. I think it'll garner more attention, and frankly, it'll have bigger margins than a compact will.
Great. Drew, car of the show.
Well, I cheated slightly on our editor's pick for that. There was a new Bentley unveiled just a couple of streets down from the show.
Close enough.
Yeah, the GT Supersports, which Bentley being my beat on Carfection over in the UK got me very, very excited indeed. It's already a car with a huge amount of power and a massive amounts of luxury, and now you can get up to 209 miles an hour.
Very necessary.
Absolutely, you know, on your daily commute that comes in extremely handy. And they've shifted. I was hoping they'd get a bit more weight off, but they've, you know, about 50 kilos they've shifted in weight. But I guess if you're still trying to maintain that luxury level, you can't really expect them to.
They can just take the wine cooler out of the back, pretty much, to drop 50 kilos, right?
Yeah, the Magnum of Champagne is taken out, is omitted from this particular kind.
There you go.
But you still have 7 bulls worth of leather on the interior, which adds a bit of weight. That wasn't something they thought they wanted to trim back.
It is lighter than 7 bulls, though, fairly. Yeah, Andrew.
So what you're saying is that it is a large, heavy, 700 horsepower, 200 mile an hour car.
Yes.
That might mean it's a British Hellcat. That is your favorite thing to hear. I absolutely know that.
I take slight offense to the idea of comparing the exquisite quality and craftsmanship of the Bentley, of any Bentley, and comparing it to...
You don't prefer the hard plastics of the Dodge?
I prefer the monthly payment.
Yes, I'll grant you on the cost level, it's certainly more attainable to get a Hellcat. But if I would probably push that extra harder on the bank to get hold of a Bentley that can do that kind of speed.
Bit. Stretch the payments out over an extra 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just talking, you know, apples and apples comparison on power, yeah, okay, 700 horsepower is 700 horsepower. But what you do with it and how you look while you do it is exceptionally
and you do
important.
get 2 extra driven wheels with the Bentley as well.
You do, which, if you drive like me, is that adds that extra level of security that makes you feel a bit safer.
You do have the nickname Maximum Attack for a reason.
Yeah, it's one of those things that gets chiseled onto your tombstone, unfortunately. So it's not something to be massively proud of. But it's insane power in an insane car. It's not, and it's been a trend that's been going on for years. We're well beyond the point at which top speeds are a relevant metric for measurement. You know, acceleration still helps, but you know, really where you feel it is torque, and that's actually something where that's where you experience performance most, and that's something that Bentley has always been able to do. And this tops out over 1,000 Newton meters of torque, which is just insane amounts of
nothing
pull.
to us Americans, but that's okay.
Yeah,
just keep talking.
It's a lot. it's a huge amount.
Do the ultra wealthy, do the plutocrats sit there and bench race the way, you know, Americans that are driving Mustangs and Corvettes do?
Not in a physical sense of actually showing what the performance is. This is largely, these cars are sold to a culture which is about knowing that it has it rather than having it.
They're swirling around the single malt and
it's
trading bars.
It's like having art on the wall which costs $4 million. It doesn't necessarily have that much value to it. It's just what it's cost. And having an engine that has over 700 horsepower, it's 750 foot-pounds of torque.
Thank you for the conversion.
Is you'll never tap into it, but you can, you know, I've got more than yours. You've got the GTC, I've got the GT Sport, and I've got the Super Sports. It's just bragging rights, really. But yeah, some people like that. And
apparently you do. That's your favorite, right?
But also, all those stats aside, it looks amazing.
This is sort of you think it's a swan song for this generation? We've seen spy photos of another version of this product coming out in the future.
I mean, we saw the second generation come in around 2012-ish of the Continental, and the Continental itself has been going since 2003. But it's been such a success story for Bentley. It's been so essential to that whole brand being completely reinvented after coming under Volkswagen in '98 and separating itself from its history of Rolls-Royce ownership. That it's carved out its own niche that sits luxury-wise, say, above Aston Martin and performance-wise right next to it, but then in terms of like comfort and ride, comparable to BMW. So it's carved its own little corner, and so it's, you know, maybe it is a crutch for the marque, but it's a crutch they're going to lean on for a long, long time. Things like Bentayga are helping expand it, and we've seen ideas that they might be trying something a bit smaller and sportier, but they will need to stretch this out as long as they can.
Yeah, and I wouldn't call it a crutch necessarily, more of a cornerstone. And it's a remarkably useful everyday supercar that happens to be a luxury coupe.
Yeah.
I've had some of the best drives of my life in that car.
Yeah, I've driven one from the southernmost point to the northernmost point of the UK and back down to London where I live. And I couldn't think of a car that I would prefer to do it.
Yeah, I was on the launch of this current generation car in Oman. in the Middle East, and it's wide open sand, and you've got this amazing car and incredible power and top speed. It was one of the highlights of my automotive career.
So when are we getting to drive the new one, and when are we pitting it against the Hellcat in a shootout?
Well, when we get to drive one is as soon as possible, and actually when we put it against the Hellcat should be slightly after that as well, because if we can put you in a Hellcat and I'll take the Super Sports, and I'll show you the difference between a Dodge and a Bentley.
We'll put the drag radials on the Hellcat because they offer that, and we'll see where we can go from there.
You can change anything you want. I still think on every front the Bentley's going to come out on top.
Okay. That's your opinion. You're entitled to it.
You're up.
All right. My car for the 2017 Detroit Auto Show is the Nissan Vmotion 2.0 concept. It is the cat's pajamas as far as I'm concerned. It is an attractive car that is going to apparently presage the Altima. That's where the design language is going, and it seems that an Altima is next up for a redesign sometime in 2018, and if it looks anything like that car, I will be absolutely over the moon about it.
Do we think it will look anything like this car?
It's always the case of concepts. There's a little bit of distillation that kind of happens in between the concept and the execution, but I really think that between this and the IDS concept that they debuted in Tokyo in 2015, Nissan does really seem to be all in on these kind of gun-slit headlights and a little more boomerang-shaped taillights, and I think the look is pulled off great. But yes, like you said, I give 50% of it will probably end up.
They've really gone for bold mainstream design. If you look at the Murano, you look at the Maxima, that's really expressive, controversial styling.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. There's a lot of hard angles, a lot of surface development. And I think they need to apply some of that to the Maxima, because what we're seeing in the marketplace now is more and more people are moving to crossover SUVs as the new family sedan. So what's left behind, the family sedan, has to get a little bit more expressive, a little more interesting to kind of earn its keep. We even saw that with the new Camry. It's definitely more aggressive than it was just this last generation.
It's always kind of tough to make that appeal between expressive styling and something that will be safe and something buyers will appreciate necessarily. It's that issue with Hyundai and Kia right now, as a matter of fact. A lot of people are jumping on top of Hyundai and Kia because they feel the styling has gone away from that kind of wonky, interesting look to something that's a bit more staid, and that's, some people like it, some people don't. And I think that's the case with Nissan too. When the Murano first came out and followed by the Maxima, I had to look back and say, am I sure this is a car they're actually selling on the street? It really does kind of have an interesting look, and I think that helps set it apart, and that really seems to be what the crowd wants, is they want something that is affordable but also looks good and helps separate them from just the beige Econo boxes that normally cover the streets.
And the Vmotion concept has an interesting technological story as well, both in terms of the semi-autonomous hardware that's therein, and maybe you could talk about that in the Bose speakers too.
There is a whole lot of tech inside. It is just not a good-looking car. It has bark and bite. The inside is, well, it's obviously beautiful. The wood trim. I learned about that steering wheel. The only reason it is shaped the way it is to create an unabated view of the screen in front. The screen is really the cornerstone of what's going on in that car, and it's evidenced by the fact that there's one in the rear seats too, which isn't really something you see on sedans that cost more affordable amounts of money. Not that it'll actually show up in the production version, but now let's talk about autonomy, like you said. This one comes equipped with ProPilot, which originally debuted on the Nissan Serena minivan in Japan and will also appear on the next-gen autonomous or semi-autonomous Leaf that Carlos Ghosn talked about at CES last week. Now, right now, ProPilot is kind of a mild system, which is a smart move in my opinion. It's single-lane highway holding, and that's all it does. You need to change a lane. You really need to move around a bit. It's just not. It's not capable of that, but that's by design. The goal is to slowly implement these systems in a way that you're not skipping over the traditional level 1, 2, 3. They're going straight through the numbers. They're going to ease everyone into it, and I think really that is what will help Nissan when they start developing semi-autonomy, is that it will be a gradual thing. It won't be something that just hits you from the side of the head like, oh, look, now you have to do this. So ProPilot looks good. There is no current timetable for when it will advance to a more technological, you know what I mean.
Yes.
A higher level, when it goes from level 1 to 2 to 3 to 4.
Correct.
But yeah, ProPilot's looking good. A little dab will do you, just like some Elmer's glue.
I couldn't help noticing this seems to be a rather large car, definitely bigger than the current Altima.
Actually,
we are talking Altima, right?
Well, fun story. It is actually just half an inch shorter than the current Altima. Cars are getting big these days. Things like the Honda Civic are now being considered almost mid-size based on interior volume, because the EPA numbers are still kind of weird about that. But despite its big look, the wheels are pushed out to the extreme ends.
Yep.
There's a whole lot of cabin space, and I think that's really what's going to matter the most. If it looks a little bigger, that's great, but once you get in it, and there's so much room for the family to stretch out, especially for somebody who's a little taller and mostly leg like I am, it's nice to see something where interior volume is put to the forefront.
There's a good amount of concept car trickery at work here.
Yeah,
Part of it is oversized wheels versus what you actually see in a production car.
Ooh.
Having center open doors, which is a common show car trick because it allows everybody to see the entirety of the interior when it's spinning around on a turntable. And that all makes it seem really broad. And then you have a slightly lower roof than what you could really get away with in a family sedan. So those things combine to lengthen the vehicle, and then they're usually wider anyway.
And the lack of door handles and all the other custom show car tricks. Since apparently no one's going to ask me, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. My car of the show is the Volvo V90, actually, which is a car we've actually seen at shows before, but it's a car that I'm absolutely in love with. The S90 was one of our favorite cars of 2016. The XC90 was our favorite car of the year before. And so to see that now evolved into this beautiful, long, luxurious sports wagon.
It's the bee's knees. It's the most beautiful
gorgeous.
wagon I think I've seen in a very long time. And owning a station wagon myself, it gives me something to aspire to. And I know that sounds weird, a station wagon owner looking to aspire to own another station wagon. But I really do love the way it looks. It takes what was good about the X90 and the S90 and it just ramps it up to 11.
Absolutely. The interior is phenomenal. The styling, again, is amazing. It's just a really large car, which is a problem for me. It's a very, very large car. And what I'm a little bit bummed about, we were speaking with Lex Kirsenmacher, the Volvo USA CEO, asking him, what's next, because they did the XC90, which is amazing, the S90, the V90, and the cross country. Next, it sounds like they're going to go XC60 and 40, so 2 more SUVs to come before we get another smaller sports wagon.
It's the way the market works.
Which
Nothing
is
we can
really
do about
frustrating
that.
to me. I was hoping
You and I can't buy all the wagons in the world to make
If only we all got together and bought all those sport wagons, then maybe we would be able to have more choices on the market. But it sounds like it's going to be at least another couple of years before we see a 40 or a 60 size wagon, a smaller, more attainable wagon that might actually fit in my garage and into my budget.
And to be honest, we may not see too many V90s on the road as it is. In order to bring an actual V90 into the US and not the lifted cross-country version, you have to special order it through the dealership. Now, I'm not sure if dealerships can order up a bunch of special orders themselves and then eventually sell them off, but there is no large allocation coming to the US of the V90. If you want it, you have to really want it.
Right, so we custom order, like I said, it'll take about 3 months to get your car, but you can do the Volvo factory delivery with this, which you can't do with every Volvo on the market. So you can, if you want to, take a vacation to Sweden, fly over there, drive your car off the factory line, have a lovely vacation in Sweden or anywhere else in Scandinavia that you like to go, and then you park it back at Volvo and they ship it to you, which will still take a month or two.
Sign me up for the Ice Hotel and the
the Ice Hotel, a little bit of the rally.
It is a stunningly beautiful car, and interestingly enough, I think station wagons are not terribly popular anymore, but the premium station wagon draws in a unique type of customer. I've talked to the Mercedes folks who have consistently offered a high-end wagon here in the States, and it's small volume, but they even have bothered with an AMG because the customers that high-end wagons attract are some of the most moneyed and loyal of any segment anywhere. So obviously Mercedes is an even higher class brand and has more expensive vehicles, but that model, the E-Class wagon, tends to have a higher average household income than things like the S-Class, and even up there with like the G-Wagon. It's really a crazy, small but very passionate buying audience.
Because
wagon owners are best owners.
Right, because they're so rare, the residuals tend to be pretty good too. So I think what we can all conclude, everybody should buy more sport wagons, especially here in the U.S.
I've done my part, he's done his part.
I've done my part.
I've bought multiple. All right, I think that's going to wrap it for our roundtable discussion. Thank you, Chris, Drew, and Andrew. Up next, I'll be back with a panel of experts talking about vehicle-to-vehicle communications. Our V2X breakdown. What is my future car talking to anyway? We'll figure that out in just a few minutes. Stay with us.